Hey, everybody, welcome to a special edition of the All Pop No Culture podcast. Usually Kevin's the host, but I get to host a little bit. We're gonna tag team this really, but I want to host the show primarily because this is a special again edition, and I have the pleasure of introducing someone who played a central and does continue to play a central role in the continued, I would say, audience celebration of a franchise that is near and dear to my heart, all of our hearts. And this franchise is the one that kicked open the door to what was called Japanimation, now anime, in North America. And that franchise, of course, is Robotech behind me. And the guest that I have here is Mr. Tom Bateman. And we're going to talk about his story, but really, I think the short version is Tom is the reason that fans had a place to congregate and celebrate. In 1985, Robotech was founded, or at least it was created and launched in the US. And then in 1995, there really wasn't any kind of official kind of convention to celebrate the 10-year anniversary. So it was Tom and his brother Dennis who put on RoboCon 10 and brought all the talent back, all the fans back, had a celebration, and then the community just never ceased to exist from there. So without further ado, without any longer of an introduction, please welcome Mr. Tom Bateman.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you. That's very, very kind words. I try to be modest and keep my feet on the ground. Uh, I remember I had gone to conventions like Star Trek. There were some like Star Trek conventions, and then there was the first anime conventions in the early 90s. And I remember because Star Trek was always really big on doing the anniversary convention. I think one of the first ones I went to was like the 20th anniversary convention for Star Trek. Like, I mean, Star Trek is so old now, but back then it was only they were less than 20 years removed
Yeah.
from the original broadcast. And I think Star Trek 3 had just come out, and they were thinking of making Star Trek 4. But these were, I just remember how excited everyone was about coming to these conventions. And there had been a Robotech convention, I think it was in 1986, and it was in Anaheim, California. So I grew up in Anaheim, California, and I had no choice but to go. I mean, it's right there. It's right there at the Grand Hotel, right across from Disneyland. And Reba West was there, who played Min May. Reba West, now Rebecca Forstadt, which is actually her name. Reba West was her pseudonym that she used when she made Robotech. But she was there, and completely with a Chinese dress, and she was cute as hell. And then Carl Masick was there, and I just remember it was Creation Convention sponsored Robotech, and I remember having a great time there. And then, fast forward a few years, it's around 1995, and I'm thinking, hey, it's the 10th anniversary of Robotech, and my brother and I are talking, and we both, well, there should be like a Robotech convention. And well, why does somebody put one on? And then, we realized that quickly, someone wasn't going to put it on, and then we were like, well, how hard could it be to put on a convention? And at that time, I mean, I'm thinking I'm 23 or so. I was still in the Marine Corps at the time. I was actually stationed in Beaufort, South Carolina, the Marine Corps Air Station there. My brother, I think, was at El Toro at the time. And so we were like, literally, it was like, how hard could it be? Let's call it the Grand Hotel and see what we can do. And the people at the Grand Hotel were so nice. They were so excited about the idea of doing it. And so the putting together stuff like that turned out to be not quite so hard. And then it's like, well, we know where Carl is. Carl is in up in LA, up at Streamline Pictures. And we got in touch with him, met with him, and he thought it was a great idea. And then he would start putting us in touch with the cast members. And I
Right.
think the first one that we really talked to was like Steve Kramer and
Mm,
then like Tony Oliver. It's like, and what happened was that it was like one actor would lead to another actor, would lead to another actor. And pretty soon we had a pretty good list of the different people who had acted in Robotech. I mean, it was by no means it wasn't comprehensive at all because at this time we were still trying to figure out who played who.
right.
Uh, because the
The credits.
there are credits at the end of
Yeah.
Robotech, but most of those names are not
The
what
real
the
name.
actual names are. And I'm asking, I'm constantly picking Carl's brain, like, well, who did the voice of Britai? Who did the voice of Exodor? Who did the voice of Vanessa? And then he'd have to think, like, oh, I think it was this. And then like I would talk to Steve Kramer and be like, well, and then it would kind of in a way it was kind of a Indiana Jones-ish kind of, you're kind of uncovering stuff. You're kind of, oh, we're doing like a little detective work and we're like figuring out who is actually who. I mean, nowadays, like all these actors who are still acting, they still, they have these Robotech uh, characters in their credits, but back then they didn't really have that. And sometimes, like, you would call up an actor, it'd be like, oh, I was in Robotech. Oh yeah, and it was like, who did I play? And not that they were like ignorant of it because they remembered the experience of recording it, but they didn't come away from it uh realizing that, hey, this show kind of has legs and people still care about it 10 years later. And we did the convention, and anyone who runs, I have great respect for everyone who runs a convention because there are so many unseen things that happen and call sorts of aggravation. And I tell you what, we're twin brothers, so me and my brother were literally at each other's throats. And I remember we were, oh boy, it's like the morning of the first day, we are literally like ready to come to blows. And over, I don't know what it was, but it was something that was stressing both of us out. And we're in the elevator and we're just like not talking to each other. We're just like, "Urgh." And then the doors open and we walk out and we see this line of people lined up for the convention. And all of a sudden we're like, wow, there are people here and they're waiting for this convention that we're putting on. And that kind of changed everything, for us. Uh I remember, like, that was such a great moment to just be just excited again. And then it was like it was a magical weekend. It really was with the just seeing the actors come, this was for most of them, it was their first experience with fans of anything. Like I saw them recently at Anime LA, but Robocon 10 was their first experience at a convention, seeing fans and even realizing this. And a lot of these have gone on and done some, incredible amount of work in the industry, doing voice work. And they're signing autographs now, selling, their pictures and everything like that, and they're making money on that. And but the first time they ever experienced that was Robocon 10, and I kind of take a lot of pride in that because it was such a positive experience for them. I remember they were tickled to death about it. Like, I remember they would talk to me about it, like I had no idea that people cared about this. And I would tell them, it's like, no, it's because it was such a good show and you were part of it. And I always remember how important it was for me to recognize how talented these people were in making Robotech, whether it was writing it, whether it was acting in it, or making the music. It was so important that they understood that the fans out there appreciated what they were doing.
So I know Kevin has a question probably, but I just wanted to stay on the convention thing for a second.
Mhm.
On a personal note, like I remember watching Reba West, of course, Rebecca Forsat, in that, Chinese, outfit, actually singing, a little bit of We Will Win, I think. And in that, old on YouTube. And it's just like, wow, you were there. Like that's just wow. That's number one. And then number two, just this past week, after having been to Anime LA, I stumbled across a bunch of Robocon 10 videos on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen
Mhm.
them, but the vibe I get is nothing but love. I mean, you see Greg Snegoff, I think, emceeing a trivia thing. Like
Oh
it was
yeah.
like, right, yeah, it was like you could tell everybody. I felt nostalgia for something that I wasn't even there for. It was a
Mhm.
weird experience, but just props, just for creating such a great magical moment that led to other moments for everyone involved. Now I'm going to let Kevin get a word in. So yeah,
Well,
you can
yeah,
take
I'm actually curious because Andrew and I talked at the end of last week's episode that we recorded about cons in general, right? My first one was a Star Trek convention much later in life. I think it was only maybe 10 years ago, right? So I hadn't been to any conventions of any kind. Um, and that was a pretty incredible experience. But back in 1995, you're doing this thing for the first time. How do you build buzz for this when there's no internet, right? There's nothing,
Yeah.
there's no normal like what we're used to as communication and spreading the word. Like, how do you get the word out to other Robotech fans? How do you even like know to communicate with other Robotech fans in that world?
Wow, I think at the time I remember there was a magazine that was called Protoculture Addicts, and we tried, we went to enlist them, and they're very helpful. I think they gave us a full page ad. Um, and there at the time, and again, we didn't know what it was called, but there was like an inner a I can't use the word internet because it wasn't called the internet at the time, but there was like some message board. I can't remember what it was called. I tell you what, I know the person who got on that back then, and he can tell me, he'll be able to tell me exactly what it was, but it was some kind of a message board or something, or mailing list, or email mailing list or
Hmm.
something before any of this happened, because he was like a network administrator kind of guy, and he uh he put it out there, so I know word got out that way. Certainly, we didn't I think it was like, I think the Robotech comics might have promoted it a little bit too. And again, this was like, no internet, no emails. It was phone calls, and you mailed stuff, and we were trying to create a flyer without ever having done anything like that before. That was a true grassroots, kind of, you're flying by the seat of your pants and trying to just come up with something that would be, and hope, and you hope, because it's like we had no idea what the response would be. And
Hmm.
so seeing people out there lined up was just, oh wow, this is great. Like, oh, I remember we hit a lot of the comic stores in Southern California. we
right.
would we would go literally to any comic store and give them flyers, and I know that's how a lot of people found out about it. And so, like, and it was a good crowd. I mean, it wasn't a blockbuster sold out crowd, but it was a good crowd. And I'm really happy a lot of people went there. I mean, obviously, you go back now and like, oh, maybe we could have done this and that, but I think we did the best we could at the time. Because again, we had no experience. I had not even staffed a convention or anything. It was like, well, I remember I literally asked my brother, how hard could it be? And it was like famous last word, because it's like, whoa, that is it's a tough thing. Organizing any kind of event is tough. So I give a lot of credit to the people who put on those events, and have great respect for them, because it's not easy, even when things go right. So, but yeah, that's kind of my story on Robocon 10 in a nutshell. There's a
And
whole lot more to tell, but that's basic. That's the basic right there. Mhm.
well, I'm actually curious as well. So you did a couple of several other conventions after that, right? Like RoboCon 10, RoboCon like 25. I might be skipping.
Well, those were kind of like we didn't really do. The next thing we did is like we did some. Well, this was later when I worked for Harmony Gold.
Right.
And I started working for Harmony Gold right around 2000-ish. And but that was more, there were already pre-established conventions, and that would be like a Robotech panel. My first
Got it.
thing I did was down in San Diego Comic-Con, and I want to say 2000, or maybe it was 2001. I have to check the dates, but Carl Masick was there, and this was when they were, Harmony Gold was, wanting to relaunch Robotech, and they had kind of made an attempt by they had tried to do Robotech 3000, which uh was a failed experiment, but uh contrary to what a lot of fans say, because I remember that was the first thing I did for Harmony Gold, like where I was doing an appearance. But I told them, I said, well, you should show it. You should show the Robotech 3000 trailer. And as soon as you show it, then you tell the fans, this is what we're not doing. Because I remember that when they showed me the Robotech, the first thing I did, I got to Harmony Gold, and I was meeting with Alan Latz, who is the executive vice president of business development. Very nice man, very interested in, wanting to launch Robotech, because I think he saw the value in it, that it was like, hey, this has franchise potential. And he was right about that. And so he said, well, this is what we had been working on. And I watched this little tape of popped in the VHS tape, and it was it kind of it was a scene from Robotech 3000. It was kind of like, it's like you show a scene and kind of like serves as kind of a half teaser, half like trailer for like the show, like a kind of a hype video.
Mhm.
And
Sizzler reel. Yeah.
yeah, and but it had a full-fledged scene and stuff like that, kind of an action sequence. And I remember, because at the time CG animation was kind of
Like Beast Wars,
a
reboot,
thing.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing.
We're
Voltron
talking
from
like,
Third Dimension. Yeah.
yeah, and they did that, and it was like, I remember I watched it, and I didn't say anything, and then and Alan said, well, what do you think? And I said, that's interesting, but that's not Robotech. And uh and he said, yeah, I think, yeah, we were thinking the same thing too. And I said, and I don't remember any of the other particulars, because I know that there was the Comic-Con coming up, and so that I did I remember suggesting it. It's like, well, I said, well, do you have anything else? And they didn't really have anything else to show. And I said, well, you might as well show that video, because people are already talking about it. So you might as well go and show it and tell people this is not what we're not doing. Because I told them that I didn't think that the fans wanted to see Robotech in CG form. Robotech was anime,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where it belonged. And but I thought it was important to me, for the credibility of Harmony Gold, to go and admit, hey, we tried this, and it didn't work, and this shows that, hey, we're willing to show, hey, we might have made a misstep here, but we're on the right track now. and
Okay.
and I thought that was important to do that, and uh I thought that was a good way to do it. But do want to clarify that the decision to move on from doing Robotech 3000 had already been made by the time,
Right.
had pretty much been made by the time I came on board. I might have been a final nail in the coffin, or just confirming what they were already thinking. but yeah, that was kind of it right there. That was my first convention experience, and then when I later on, like we do convention experiences, usually like with Anime Expo, or there was like the LA Comic Book Sci-Fi Convention. Like if there was something local around Southern California, we would try to jump on it.
Okay.
Like I said, Anime Expo, we've got to do it. We've got to get a booth or something. At this time, like we had licensees, like it was TDK Media Active was doing the Robotech Battle Cry game, and they made this real nice thing. We had Toynami, which was the toy licensee. So there were opportunities for us to do something to promote Robotech. We kind of did a Robocon 20 thing that was kind of where we tagged along with Anime Expo that year. And this was in Anaheim, and we kind of be sure you run those things. If for anyone running a convention, be sure you run something like that uh with the convention itself, because they might get an idea. Like there was a time where they were a little confused, like or a little concerned that we were trying to run a separate convention on top of what they were doing.
Oh man.
Uh,
Okay.
but well, it's like because we were calling it Robocon 20, and they were like, "Well, what is this? Wait, is this something separate from Anime Expo?" And you're trying to
Got it.
piggyback on us. And I didn't honestly, and I take some blame for that because I didn't think that it was a big deal. But Anime Expo is a much bigger corporate entity, and I think you had to kind of respect their boundaries. But the thing is, we weren't charging anyone anything,
Yeah, it was
and
just a
but we
presence.
were just kind of like, hey, we're doing 20th anniversary Robotech events at Anime Expo, but you have to go to Anime Expo. You have to buy a ticket to Anime
Yeah.
Expo. You have to buy a membership to Anime Expo in order to attend these. So once we explained that, they were cool with it. But initially, they were like, "Whoa, whoa, what are you doing? Are you running a convention at our you like and doing something into what we were doing?" So that was my experience doing kind of convention things, and then I would go to conventions and talk up the Robotech property while I was employed there at Harmony Gold.
So basically, then I think from what you're saying, then Robocon 10 is special not only because it was kind of the first kind of convention for Robotech that was made, to celebrate it after all those years, but
Mhm.
it was its own standalone thing. It wasn't attending another event. That's what I'm hearing. And if that's the case, then that's
Yes.
truly
Mm.
amazing.
Yeah, it
Kudos.
was. Yeah, and that was it. It was very, very much um, a true grassroots convention. We did have support by Harmony Gold, and they were very approving of it. But it was definitely, its own thing, a very grassroots little event. Um, and it's still very special to this day for me. And I'm probably going to search out those YouTube videos and
I'll
watch
send them to
them,
you.
because I think it would be probably really educational for me to go back and see what everyone was talking about, because I still remember not really seeing any of those because I was so busy running the convention. I didn't really get
Yeah.
to sit down and like listen to the panels or other things. I do remember the concert though, when we did the
Michael
whole.
Bradley. Oh my God, right?
No, well,
Or no,
no,
Min Min.
Michael Bradley did not perform
Okay, it
because we
was some,
could not
yeah.
find the music.
Okay.
Um, we couldn't find the music at the time, like for him to sing to. Um, and there was a minute. Rebecca did some Minmay songs, and she was very, very nervous, and we probably put a little too much pressure on her to do it. Uh, but I it still ended up being a very special experience,
Oh yeah.
especially hearing Ulpio Minucci playing "The Way to Love" on the piano.
Yeah,
That's something I will treasure. Yeah.
I got
So
you.
that Robocon 10 definitely is a very, very special event for me.
So let me ask. So, um, I mean, Robocon 10, you said you're around 20, 23,
23,
relatively
yeah.
young, still in the military. Like, what
Mhm.
what was your like when you're 13 and watching Robotech? You're 23 doing a convention. Like, at what point did you know maybe the entertainment industry was going to be your jam? And how did you get like to Harmony Gold and beyond, from that? Like what was the path of that?
Oh wow. Wow. Okay. I think I got out of the Marine Corps and I started going to college and was trying to, do stuff that I thought would be interesting. And I remember taking film and television production classes and finding those would be interesting. And it was a great program it was at Golden West College, and they had a great where they really like put you through the paces of filming stuff, like learning how to do an in-camera edit with a V8 with a video
Mm,
recorder. And you're like, having to create create a news package, and like how do you do that and doing it with an in-camera edit, which is means you're filming your piece as you go, and you have to figure out what shots you need, how long you shoot them, and that because you didn't have Pro Tools or something like that, or other video editing software. You were like, you had to do it in the camera. And but I thought that taught a lot about brevity, keeping stuff to
hmm
the point. And so those are like some real things. And like, we would do like news broadcasts, we'd broadcast sports events. Um, but you learn like the nuts and bolts of production, like preparation, uh, uh, knowing who's your staff, who's doing what job, and the importance of everyone in doing that. And I think preparation was a big thing for me. It's like you have to plan your shoot. You have to plan. You can't wait for these things, for these mistakes to come, because while you're shooting, time is money, and you don't have time to do reset, set people up again. And you're shooting. And so you learn to appreciate what people do with live broadcasts and stuff like that, what video directors do in when they're in the booth and they're saying, okay, camera three, okay, and take it. And and now we're shift, ready on camera four, and take it. You would see those things, but it was kind of like, wow, product TV and film production is a serious business, and you have to really be prepared, and you have to know your job. And so I was doing that, and I don't know if I remember at the time, I was kind of just working your average job. And Alan Latz at Harmony Gold called me and was just wanted to ask me about stuff about Robotech, and also like mainly all about Macross, like what was going on in Japan, which Harmony Gold at that time didn't really know at the time, or they knew, but they didn't know the details of it, like what I could provide as a fan, like because I knew that Macross had been develop further as a property in Japan. So those are things that they were interested in, and that was a time he wanted to kind of bring Robotech back, and so I was invited to be part of that effort at Harmony Gold.
ah,
So I didn't like apply for it. I just like
fascinating.
like it was just like, okay, well, I'm involved already because I've been providing them valuable information and knowledge. I was a subject matter expert, as it were,
hmm
both on Robotech and on Macross. And so it was kind of like, okay, well, why don't you come on board? And it was like, sure. I mean, I'm like, this is an opportunity to work on the show that I grew up and loved. Of course, I'm going to do it. Who wouldn't do it at that time? So that was a real exciting moment for sure.
I can
All
only
right.
imagine. Now I'm thinking about the folks who might be listening who may not have like watched Robotech or seen Robotech. So I kind of want to give a little bit of like lip service to like just the show itself and what made it special. And if you could kind of like sum up, on a relatively like like you were trying to pitch the show to someone who was, maybe it was like a 20-year-old or 15-year-old nephew or niece or whatever, and you say, "Hey, watch this old school show." Like how would you describe it to them?
Ooh, wow. Probably a little easier to do it now because, we're kind of used to epic storytelling in media. So but I thought no, I think how I would pitch it to someone who's never seen it.
Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, I'd say, hey, do you like great characters and great, and do you like anime? Yes. Do you like great characters? Yes. Do you like, robots, transforming robots? Yes. Well, this is the show for you because it's got all of those things for you. And it's exciting, and I think the thing I probably would just hit the most is you're gonna love these characters. You're
Yeah.
gonna really be into those stories. So, if I talk to a girl, I'd be like, "Oh, you're gonna really like the story because there's some great female characters there." And if I talk to young boys, I'd be like, "Oh, there's great action, in there. You'll really be into it." Uh, you know, I don't know if it would work because I couldn't get my nephews to watch it,
Oh,
and
you tried.
sadly, I don't know. They just, you know, but I'd just be straightforward. It's like, you're gonna love those characters, and it's a fun sci-fi setting, but it's a show that really it kind of challenges you to keep up with it, but it's not so daunting or scary. It's not, you know, oh boy, it's like, you can watch it half hour a day and get into it. And, I mean, now we call it binge watching. I mean, obviously, anyone who had the access to 85 episodes could binge watch,
Mhm.
and they probably would. And I know I probably would have if I had access to 85 episodes at the time that it first came out. So yeah, I mean, it's something that you can really, I think, sink your teeth into, and and you just get into the characters. I think I would highlight that the most
So,
is the characters.
and
Right.
that's a perfect segue into one of the questions I also wanted to ask you, as I love, because when I talk about shows, I always talk about who would I be and what would I do, or what my decisions would be. So my next question to you would be, are there any characters in the show that you either related to, resonated with, or even inspired you in some way? And then Kevin, you can jump in on that too, because I want to make sure that because you love this show too. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
if you don't mind sharing,
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah. Oh, well, Rick Hunter, I think I just because young and kind of like, not not that experienced, but maybe a little cocky. I remember when he shows up, he's really cocky. But he's thrown into a situation that he's wasn't prepared for, but he performs admirably in that first episode, or actually the first few episodes. You're really on, as they would call it, the hero's journey with Rick Hunter.
Yeah.
You're really invested in what he's doing, and whether it's him sitting in the cockpit and all of a sudden it's like, hey, hey, we're on
Gotta take
alert.
off.
Why haven't you taken off? And he's like, you don't mean me, do you? Hey, and it's like, and I'm thinking that's how I would react. And then he's like, well, if you insist, and he's just like, hey, he's a pilot. Hey, I can take this thing up. And that was a real, like, all right, he's going up, and he's a bit overwhelmed by the battle. And then Roy comes in, and everyone, and then Roy Foker's like, that is so cool. That is like that. And he's like, that's the big brother character there. It's like, and he's like, and I remember he's like, Rick, you're there. And then it's like, oh, well now, hey, you're in the fight. Let's go. And he's like, and then also Rick gets into battle, then he spins out and he transforms. And then the next episode, he's trying to figure out how the Veritech works. And then he meets Min May, and then, like, they almost get killed because he's flying in that great sequence where they're falling through the air and he gets Minmay up and gets her into the cockpit. As crazy as it is, it's one of the coolest sequences ever. But the thing is, it's Rick really stepping up, and so you're really into Rick, and then and he goes and makes mistakes. He's immature. He sometimes gets pouty. I remember he got real pouty and moody when and it was Binmay who calls him out saying, well, you're just sitting around just feeling sorry for yourself. And then and then uh then the transformation happens, and then he decides, I'm gonna join the service. And it was like, wow, there's a transformation in a character there. So yeah, Rick is someone, it's like I could kind of identify because he's a young guy. Roy Fokker, right off the bat, is that's your role model. That's like, and he's cool, he's got that jet with the skull and the crossbones, and he just looks cool, and it's like that's the guy you want to aspire to be like. And I think that the voice acting performances were great from Tony Oliver and Dan Warren as Rick Hunter and Roy Fokker, and so I think those two characters probably right off the bat had the biggest draw, but the supporting cast was great too. Because everyone react. I remember thinking, oh, okay, I understand how these people are reacting, and they're reacting in an understandable way. Well, not Minmay with, oh, I got to go back because my my diary's out and somebody might read it, and I was like, that's the only one that kind of made me roll my eyes. But it's kind of a girl and being silly. But other than that, I mean, I really like Lisa Hayes. I liked Claudia, and even like they're dealing with an emergency situation, and they all respond in a professional manner. And later on, as I was in the military, I kind of appreciated how they acted in a very professional manner, and that was kind of, well, that's that tracks with what my own experience was. So yeah, that I think right off the bat is something that resonated me, and then it continued to resonate through the rest of the 85 episodes. You would see those moments with characters and stuff like that, and really kind of understanding how the characters are acting, and you're following their journey, and that's what made it always interesting, because Rick Hunters would be in there for 36 episodes, and then a new cast comes in, and even then, and like characters come and go. Zor Prime doesn't become a main character until about halfway through the series of Robotech Masters. So there's a lot, and then of course all the great guest spots that came up. Colonel Wolf, Dusty Ayers. Those are all interesting throughout the show, and it just kept me even more and more interested in the show as it went on.
Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, less so from a character standpoint, but like from a storytelling standpoint, like this is one of the first shows that I remember watching where you could see a character die, right? Like as a kid watching a cartoon, there were stakes in this, and I'm just, when you're watching this for the first time, like what are the moments, not necessarily characters, but the moments that really drew you in, that made it feel like it was something special to you?
Wow, I remember. Okay, the in it was after the main gun fired in the first episode. After the main gun fires, and then the first Zentradi attack, and then uh they're going into battle, and the voice work is really, the guys are sounding a bit desperate, and you see the ship gets destroyed or shot up, and uh they're not sugarcoating it. I mean, they're not being morbid about it, and they're not saying, "Oh my God, people have died here." It was just, oh, I remember the helicopters that went out and they found the Zentradi in the sea, And clearly they're like, they're in the helicopter and they're saying, we're out here looking out here, haven't seen anything. And then all of a sudden the Zentradi battle pods show up and then they turn their guns and they start they start shooting them down. And the guy says, "Hey, we're being fired upon. Let's get out of here." Ah! And you see the helicopter blow up and no parachutes are coming out. No one's jumping out of the helicopter. And then Lisa very calmly, very matter of fact, says, they're gone, sir. They've been shot down. And I'm like, wow, that's it. Like, and then I think I remember the first episode. There was a missile strike, and boom, and you saw these people getting thrown by this explosion, and they didn't sanitize it. They didn't go and say, "Oh, well, luckily everyone was just injured." And I say that because Voltron was notorious for doing that.
Yeah.
Everything nothing bad happened in Voltron. Nothing like you'd see a devastated city and the voiceover would go, "Oh wow, well it looks like everybody got to their underground shelters." And Robotech didn't do that. And I remember being like, "Yes, they're not doing that. They're showing war as it, as it is supposed to be." And I'm not being bloodthirsty. I hadn't watched action movies yet. But I remember seeing The Day After on TV.
Oh yeah.
And if anyone who had seen that at the time, that was the most, it's still like, if you watch the sequence when the attack happens, that is one of the most horrific scenes. And it's not gratuitous or anything, but it shows this is war. This is catastrophic nuclear war, and people are getting vaporized. And it's I don't want to say traumatizing, but I just remember being struck by how like dark it was. And it's just in the sense of, this is real. This is what war will look like if we ever go to nuclear war. But I appreciated it because it didn't try to sanitize it for me. It didn't try to soften the blow. So if I could as a kid, and if I could handle watching The Day After, I sure can handle watching what happened in Robotech. So I'm glad it didn't dumb it down for me. It didn't try to protect me or the audience from the reality of war. And that made me feel that the stakes were high. And that made me more emotionally invested in the characters. And it was, from those first few moments, like either seeing an explosion, people getting tossed by an explosion, or seeing those helicopters get shot down, and them acknowledging they've been shot down, sir. They're gone, sir. They've been shot down. And I'm like, oh, we're in for it. And they're keeping it real. And I still to this day appreciate the show's courage in doing that. And I would love to talk to Carl Masick about, how aware were you of the way the anime had been sanitized at that point? Because Carl was just like, play it straight, and put these shows out the way they were originally intended, and meaning that we don't sugarcoat the violence. We don't try to sanitize it. And I use that word too much, but that's kind of what it was. And I so appreciate Carl's decision to do it, and all the people who produced it, the writers, were able to keep it at that level that it just enhanced the drama.
The Day After and Wrath of Khan, I'm pretty sure were the same writer director, Nicholas Meyer.
Nicholas Meyer, yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool that you mentioned that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be safe to say then, because I've asked you about favorite characters and favorite moments then, that of the three sagas you see behind me, and it might be like choosing a favorite child, which is never fair, but do you have like a favorite of the three, or if you could rank the three, how would you rank them and why?
I tend to not want to do that because, we all know the Macross is the most popular, and it has the most episodes. It's the first one. It has the biggest cast. It has the most grandiose storyline. Um, so I judge each of the chapters of Robotech very differently because they're very different shows. Robotech Masters is the bridge show, like, and I think it's even more fascinating when you rewatch it because of it was the connective tissue that connected the Macross saga to the new generation. Now, new generation is very much uh, you're following the path of of Scott Bernard and his group, and it's very episodic. It doesn't really kind of get into the big cosmos encompassing storyline until later in the show. Um, but I think that I kind of don't uh because I kind of don't want to feed into, oh, well, Macross is the
Oh
best.
no. I mean, I definitely am not trying to like
Yeah,
start a
yeah.
war, it's just, because I can say, and I think that I like to say that when I talk, I try to be a peacemaker, right? But I definitely
Mhm.
have a soft spot, I think, me for Masters, and maybe it's because
Mhm.
like I'm a sucker for the underdog, number one. But then number
Yeah.
two, like I liked for me, the political intrigue between like an Emerson versus like a Leonard. And I'm
Mhm.
not gonna bash Leonard, I promise. However, I will say that Emerson and Leonard had definitely different approaches. I think Leonard was more about just like boom, 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 fight, fight, fight. And Emerson was more like, hey, let's try to talk it out. And there was definitely some enmity between the two. And I think that it was just instructional. It sometimes just happens, but I think Emerson at the end of the day, he went out with his dignity. He went out. No spoilers. Okay, I won't spoil. I'll just say Emerson was definitely a man of honor, and I think that even the strained relationship with Bowie, the way that Dana was able to kind of assemble this 15th squad, the five key members, and they all had their contribution. I loved the whole teamwork aspect of the Masters. And again, to your point, because I'm a sucker for big storytelling, to find out that this, androgynous purple-haired alien is actually a clone of the person who discovered, who invented protoculture and is the reason all this is happening. It just made the show, I think, for me, really special. That said, and I know this interview is about you, but I just wanted to share as well. Hopefully, not like try to start a rivalry between the generations. Also, love the fact that the Macross saga it is ultimately classic. It just is. And I remember when we switched from Macross to the Masters, I was like, what? Like I was definitely like not, it was jarring. Okay. And I
I
survived.
wasn't ready. Mhm.
Yeah, right. It was so
I
jarring.
wasn't ready for that. I,
No.
I, yeah,
And
wow.
I kept waiting for like, okay, so when's Rick come back? So then when they go to the mounds and they actually say it's in this is the ruins of the SCF-1, I sat up. I'm like, okay, cool. Or when, anyways, all I'm saying is the Macross saga is amazing. And then again, of course, TNG. Now everybody in this podcast is going to hear this because only the convention people heard this. But where I lived, they only showed the first 5 episodes of the new generation. And then after that, it went right
Wow.
back to the Macross saga. So it
Mhm.
was terrible. We were deprived. So this saga right here, I've seen the least of, but I've read the most of in the
Mhm.
novels. But they all
Mhm.
have their awesomeness. And I think it was great that after the bombast of the Master Saga, we go back to like the rubble and humanity rebuilding and Lonely Soldier Boy on his cyclone. Loved Rand. I think it was hilarious. And they just go from town to town, from situation to situation, leveling up, getting more mecha, and then we finally climax at Reflex Point. So got love for all of them. But me
Mhm.
personally, and I'm holding back, just like you held back earlier about the convention stuff. It's all about the Masters. Kevin, you can either choose to join in on that or you can go with another question.
Well, I'll do both, but like for me, it was always the Macross saga. But I think it was because I don't remember if Top Gun came out before this or after. I think it was after this,
After,
right?
After.
man. Isn't
Yeah,
that crazy?
but I was always a big fan of the Tomcat for the fighter jet, right? And so seeing that in the cartoon and then seeing it transform um, in a way that felt more organic than Transformers, right? Like here you're seeing something that really has a more fluid transformation and generally stays the same size and follows, some very realistic rules, right? Um, but like I said, I was always a fan of that jet in particular, anyways. And so seeing it on screen, like it's such a weird thing to like fall in love with, but like that was my thing because like I remember being a little kid and being like, I would love to be a pilot. I would be a fighter jet pilot. I would. I'm a total coward. I would be the worst fighter jet pilot. But but like you see this, and then you see this thing where you've got this, and then you got the SDF-1, you've got the big space battles, you've got all the stuff that just draws you in. And even as a kid, like I really appreciated the storytelling in the way that it was done. You're talking full season story arcs where you know Voltron sort of had some story arcs that went a long way. Transformers did not. G.I. Joe really didn't. Later seasons, maybe. So, like, Robotech was really special in a lot of those ways. Like, it did things that other shows didn't. And Macross had, I mean, Macross had romance in a kid's cartoon. Well, it's not a kid's cartoon, let's be fair, but
Oh,
like,
it was.
but it was a cartoon that we were watching as kids,
Yeah.
you know? And it was just it felt like something new and special and really incredible. And so, Macross is always going to be my favorite um my favorite jam there. But looking at it and looking at because Andrew and I have had this discussion before, but looking at Robotech and even to be fair, Star Blazers, Transformers, things that came from of that generation. And you talked about Robotech 3000 being computer generated. Like, if you are looking at anime 90s, 2000s, and even today, like, is that 90s, 80s style of anime still your favorite? Do you feel better about the direction that animation's going lately, or what's your feelings on animation in general right now?
Oof. Um, well, first off, I want to just kind of revisit the three sagas. Is I think my base answer is if you don't watch all 85 episodes, I don't want to talk to you. It's like you got to watch all of them because they're all so important,
Yeah.
and that's why I
Mhm.
cannot pit the ones against each other because the thing is, they're very different shows, and they have these great interactions. Like Andrew, you were talking about Masters and how it was so that kind of does it for you, and you were talking about like the relationship between Emerson and Leonard. And General Leonard is also a man of honor too. And I will defend that to the end of the day. But I remember just seeing like how that you can have two people with very strong personalities disagree. And I'm not saying like, Leonard was always right. Um, but Emerson wasn't always right either. And but I think they were both dealing with the situation as best they could based on their own experience. And because I love the idea that there's nuance to characters,
Absolutely.
and they're not perfect. Uh, and I those are things that made them feel more real to me. So, and I think that I appreciated that in the characters is that they were flawed, and if you go through all three generations, all of the characters have flaws. They're not perfect people, and that made them so much more real to me. And so I look at it that way. That's kind of how I want to sum up my perception of 3 shows, I tell people watch the all 85 episodes before you comment on that. And if I would hear someone say, "Oh, I don't like Masters because it's boring," it's like, go back and rewatch it, and then come back to me and give an intelligent answer. So, because I think if I can say Masters is probably the most underappreciated
Yes.
part of Robotech, the original 85 episodes, and anyone who is critical of it, it's like, you know what, go back and watch it again and come back to me with an intelligent answer. But going back to your question about what anime style I like and what I think about the industry now. I grew up in the 80s, and I grew up watching that anime, after Robotech, watching obviously Do You Remember Macros, Do You Remember Love, and then Megazone 2-3, and then part 2 came out. I was like, whoa, what is this? Part 2 is a completely different visual style, but still just this amazing animation. I remember Bubblegum Crisis. I remember Gal Force. And these are things I'm seeing in their original Japanese format without any subtitles, without any kind of story notes. I remember watching Zeta Gundam. And I remember going to a Japanese video store out in Buena Park, California. And I remember seeing this VHS, and it was like, oh, I pulled it out. It was like, and it said Z Gundam. And I was like, oh, I know what that is. I'm going to watch it. I don't care. I'm going to watch it. So I watched it, and it was just like, it must have been like 2 episodes. But again, no subtitles or anything, but I'm just thrilled with watching it. But I love the animation. And ironically, one of the character designers on Zeta Gundam worked on Southern Cross. And so there's that connection there. As anime has gone on, I mean, I follow certain character designers. Some of them have changed. Haruhiko Mikimoto, who did the character designs for Macross, his style has changed quite a bit. And because if you look at his work in like the early 80s when he did Macross, and then to his work late in the late 80s and 90s with Gundam 0080 and Gunbuster, his style started evolving. And then when he gets around to Macross 2, it really changed. And then he still regularly does art in Japan. Like, and if there's ever a new like a video release, boom, he's doing the cover. And he actually drew a manga called Macross the First, which was an attempted retelling of the original Macross story, and his style again changed. But then you have like other anime creators whose style is much more consistent, like Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, who is the character designer for Gundam. His style has really been very consistent, and I think he's the greatest anime character designer and manga artist in history. And he is actually a quite accomplished director that was able to revisit his original Gundam animation that he had directed back in the late 70s and early 80s when the original Gundam theatrical releases. And then he was the lead character designer for Zeta Gundam. But then he took, he did something like Gundam F91, but Gundam the Origin was his attempt to retell the original Gundam story. And it started out as a manga, and they retold the whole story of original Gundam and added all of this backstory prequel stuff, which was great.
Yes.
And then they had the opportunity to animate that stuff.
Yes.
The origin animation
Beautiful.
is actually the origin story. And the thing is, he's directing it, and his characters, again, remarkably consistent, a little bit updated for now, but it's still incredibly recognizable as the anime that he had drawn back in the 80s. So I appreciated that because I don't think a lot of the anime artists now do that. And it is kind of hard to kind of maintain continuity with design. Sometimes you do. I mean, I think the Evangelion movies have, they've revisited that quite a few times. And I know that these last few movies that came out, the character designs still look pretty good. I mean, they still look
Absolutely.
the same.
Yeah.
Attack on Titan, though, I was I
They switched
didn't like the change of
studios.
animation.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. Now, yeah, you got me going. You said Attack on Titan, I jumped in. Yeah, no. So it was, of course, Wit and Mappa, and I'm okay with the design change, and I even saw this online because I feel like the Wit animation style was a bit more like cartoony and more just kind of bright, whereas Mappa was more like, and it's not just me, like other people were saying this too, like a bit more realistic and less like cartoony. And I think the tone of season four versus seasons one, two, and three, while it's violent all the way throughout. I mean, you're not getting into like straight up like genocide that like with the rumbling that season four is. And the hero of your show is still somewhat of a hero and he's troubled. By season four, you find out he's actually like, not being spoilery, but definitely not the hero. I mean, not really. I think to call him a hero would be a bit of a stretch. But that's my personal opinion. But I cut you off because I got passionate. Go for
Yeah.
it.
I'm just talking like strictly on a visual level. I like consistency. I'm a big fan of that. And uh the I just felt that didn't help. But and then I'm not going to get into story stuff about Attack on Titan. That's a whole other
We
episode.
might
I'm
let's
happy
just
to
do
jump
that.
into.
I think the three of us can do it
But
because he's seen it too. So yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
I like consistency and stuff like that. But then it's like, well, then there's what was it? Megazone 2-3 and Megazone 2-3 Part 2 look completely different anime wise. But I dig both of them, and it's kind of, well, would I want Megazone 2-3 Part 2 to look like Megazone 2-3 Part 1? Uh, I'm not sure if I'd want that because I think the new design did give it a bit of an edge. And because part two is a much more violent story. Um, thanks to, I mean, change of director from Noboru Ishiguro and sure, yeah, Ichiro Itano. It's a complete change. And so I don't know. But I think I like consistency. And I the anime now, it's like Attack on Titan really is the only new anime that I really got
Same.
into
Same.
in recent years. And I know that there's so much out there.
So much out
and
Mhm.
and I don't want to say, I don't want to come off like I'm, grouchy old anime fan, like, oh, I just like the old stuff.
there.
uh it's just there's so much to watch. You don't know,
Where to start?
what's good. I mean, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen
Yeah.
Cowboy Bebop, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really good. But I think I really like Cowboy Bebop because it was the anime, the character design I thought was great. And that's one of my favorite designers. And if you haven't watched Golden Boy, go watch Golden Boy, because Golden Boy is the same character designer as Cowboy Bebop, and it's Golden Boys. You'll laugh your ass off.
Tom, I'm actually really intrigued because you're name dropping all the anime that I like. So before, I just want to confirm this. You mentioned Evangelion. Did you watch Evangelion?
I have Yes, I have made it to. I
Nice.
haven't watched every Evangelion.
Okay.
I'm almost like I kind of feel this is a little too heady for me. I'm probably going to need a coach to take me through Evangelion. And because there's so many, I mean, there's Rebirth, End of Evangelion, and then there's
All right.
this
I gotta go.
new
So
More
I
movies that came out. Like I'm like I don't I literally I remember asking a friend of mine who is all up on that. I said, "How do I watch Evangelion?" And then he tells me, and I'm like, "Okay, one of these days I'm gonna sit down, but it's kind of like I'm gonna probably need someone with me to walk me through it." To really gain the full experience because the thing is I've watched enough of it to really appreciate what it is, and it is sounds like a pretty a great it is a great anime series, and it is worthy of all of its following. I'm just haven't watched it enough to know it, and I'm kind of like I feel like I get a little lost in it a little, the storyline. So yeah, that's one of my things on my to-do list because I did watch most of the original series.
okay.
And so I mean, I know who Ray is. I know who
Yeah.
Oscar Langley is. I understand. I remember what's the Miss Misato. Uh, you know, she reminds me of a girl I knew in high school. Every time I
Aw.
see her, I'm like, she's got sass. And I heard that a girl that I grew up with and went to high school with. Her name was Yvonne. And every time I look at Miss Misato, I'm like, that's Yvonne right there. So those are things that like I know that, and one of these days I'm gonna really really sit down and watch that. But that goes on the list of other things. Like I still want to watch the original Yamato show. I'm talking the old
No, I'm with
1974
you on
series.
that.
Mhm.
Exactly. Like Yamato, like Star Blazers, but yeah, Yamato. And then even I know you talk about Battle of the Planets, and like so there's stuff that I need to get to. So we're on the same page. Like these are just
Mhm,
holes that need to be filled. Now I will say one of the newer animes, right? Is Death Note, and kind of trudging through it. I will finish it. Is it something that was like, oh my God, you need to see this, Andrew? I'm like, I'm just gonna do it so I can say I've done it, and then I can say it really wasn't my jam. I mean, it was cool, but it's not like
mhm.
Evangelion or like Cowboy Bebop or like the others. But as
But
far as Evangelion goes, I'm gonna institute some what's the word I'm looking for? Discipline, because I could go on and on and on about it. What I'll
well,
say though, you
Death.
talk about heady, it's heady.
Yeah,
Go.
I was gonna say Death Note is like in a lot of circles considered like a modern classic, though. Like a
Yeah,
lot of people talk about Death Note like
that's
it's
why I see it.
great, and I've watched it, and I'm like, it looks pretty good. The story is up and down. It's weird. Um, but when I think of the ones I grew up with, the Star Blazers, the Robotech, these shows, like they feel way more epic to me in scale than something like Death Note. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know. I don't know. Like I feel like the art style has kind of come back around. Like it to me, it's better than it was. Like we had a stretch of time where I didn't think it was that great. Andrew, we've talked about this, and just again, kind of the same reason. Like we grew up with the 80s, 90s anime style, so that's kind of our jam. You posted something on Facebook where it was
I
what if
did.
Attack on
Attack on
Titan was
Titan.
done
It
in
was
the 90s
gorgeous.
style and look
It was
it looked
gorgeous.
good. Like it was kind of like
It was
it's kind
actually
of like the
better.
proof in the pudding, right? Where you
Yeah.
you say I like the 90s better, but maybe this new stuff's good, and then they're like, well, we just did it in the 90s style, and you're like, okay, yeah, the 90s style is
Yeah.
still king. And I look at animation and I wonder, you know, are we going to see a shift towards the stuff that like Arcane is doing, where it's full on art on screen again, which I feel like, especially in the 90s, anime got really artistic. Um, I think of something like Ninja Scroll, which I watched. Like that was visually like it felt stunning when I watched it in high school. Um, and Arcane is like that, but the budget on something like that is so insane that like I can't see most shows going that route. So, I still feel like I lean towards that kind of more simple but
Mhm.
better art style of the 80s and 90s. It just feels I don't know. Maybe it's just nostalgia. Maybe like you said, maybe I'm just the old man that's watching it and loving it for for it being my childhood. But it just looks better to me.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I remember like people would like in the 90s people tell me, oh, you got to watch Kenshin, or you got to watch Tenchi Muyo, and I always remember kind of I don't really I'm not really into the character designs and stuff like oh, you got to watch Ninja Scroll, and I'm kind of like I don't know if I want to invest my time, and like at that time you're buying blue VHS
hmm
tapes or something. That's a you know that's a lot of money, and it's like and it's like I didn't have the time to go freewheeling like oh, buy this and stuff. Like I know that like there were people like watching anime, and I know what that was like to watching all the anime that I could, and I was like finding that stuff in the 80s. Like I would watch anything in the 80s. This was in the days before the first subtitle tapes came out, and to say nothing about when the dubs came out. I would watch anything back then. But even then, like looking back at now, like what the anime that was out there in the 80s, I still have a tape. I remember I made this tape. A friend of mine introduced me to another friend. He said like because he was into anime, and he's like, "Oh, you got to go meet this guy. He's down in San Diego, uh, and he's got all this anime." And I'm like, I went down, took a trip down to San Diego, met this guy who was a friend of a mutual friend of mine, and I remember spending the weekend with him. And I said, "Oh," and he literally had stacks of anime, and I'm like, "Okay, I want to record like every opening title for every show," and I still have that videotape, and it's all these opening titles of all these shows, and it's like and I actually made a YouTube playlist, and I think Andrew, I think you I was showing I actually had it in the same order. Thankfully, like most of these opening titles are on YouTube, and because usually they would put the best quality animation into the opening
yeah,
titles,
yeah.
and they would have catchy songs and stuff, which I mean the Japanese for the most part they don't skimp when it comes to the music.
hmm
Especially they put some serious talent behind coming up with songs and stuff, and there are some great, I mean there are just some like some anime shows that I only know because of the song, and while I may not have watched the show, I remember the song, and uh that's just something unique about anime. um so even if I don't like sit down and religiously watch every show, I can still appreciate shows like Pat Labor. I kind of dig it, but I've never really watched like all the episodes. I think I watched some of it. I watched the original OVA series, but I haven't watched anything beyond that. Uh, you know, I mean, there's just, I mean, I could go any number of shows. So, you know, I try to appreciate as a whole, and um, but now it's like there's so much you got to be picky about what you do. You just don't have the time to watch everything. So like now I'm really picky, and it took a while even for me to get into Attack on Titan, because I was like, it's finally like someone saying, "Hey, you really need to watch this," and I was like, "Okay," and then I finally in, and it was like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "Wow, this was The Walking Dead on steroids,"
hmm
and like I'm like I remember coming away from watching probably what the first, that first season, and thinking I've never felt such jeopardy in characters in a story, that literally like I was out of breath watching that show because it was so intense. I've never seen anime with that intensity. And so I will give a lot of credit to Attack on Titan for that. I will reserve my comments about how it ended for another time. But there was a monumental achievement in storytelling, certainly for a good amount of the beginning of that story, or what I don't. We'll talk about that. What
Well,
happened?
I think we need to a future episode where we talk about that because I mean
Yeah.
Kevin like finally relented because I would not shut up about Attack on Titan. So
That's
he gave it a
true.
shot, watched it. We actually did a show talking about the finale, and I think we both landed in a pretty good place. And again, we're not
Yeah.
gonna talk about it, but we landed in a pretty good place. But I think the three of us have enough to we're gonna have a good, exciting, entertaining conversation. You talk about the music, and yeah, I think that music in anime in general is a huge reason why I got into it.
Hmm.
I love music. We talked about how I wanted to do a Voltron soundtrack, primarily inspired, believe it or not, by your brother Dennis. So just for the people listening, in 1995 or six, either way, it was a 10th anniversary. Robotech Perfect soundtrack was done by Dennis Bateman, and I was a sophomore at UC Santa Barbara. And I let me tell you, like I was so happy. Like I literally was like, the universe is a wonderful place. This music that I've loved all my life, and I only was only like 18, 19 at the time,
Mhm.
is now finally available, and it's great, and it just made my life whole. So going back to this year, Attack on Titan, because the Japanese don't play around, they will actually pack out, just like Game of Thrones does, a full-on arena or some sort of performance venue, orchestra, video, and they'll play the music live. And AOT's on tour globally right now. They're going to be in Vegas in April, so I'm going to go see that. So just wanted to give lip service to that. But one of the questions that I know Kevin was going to ask, so I was going to kind of jack it really quick, is if you were given kind of unfettered. Watch it. I'm gonna leave that for Kevin. You can do that one. I'll do another one, and that is, would you prefer a live action continuation of Robotech or reboot, or an animated one if it was your choice, and why?
Hmm. Well, I'm like, why not do both?
Ha!
My thinking. I'm honest with that because I think Robotech could work as a live action, and I think it could work, and obviously it works as an anime. Uh, and it just would take the right vision, uh, and the right story, and also you have to figure in the audience today. The audience today is not the audience of 1985. It's
Yeah.
not the audience of 1995, not even the audience of 2005 or 2015. It's 2025. It's different. And you have to figure out how to do that and still be true to the original show. I mean, or not. I would choose to be true to the original show in anything, whether I did it as a live action or I did it as an anime. So certainly the capability is there. I mean, as far as technology wise,
Yeah.
to do it, it's a matter of will and it's a matter of money. So I'm very open to it in any form. I think it could work in any form. And again, it just comes up, telling the right story.
And before Kevin jumps in, I also want to, one of I always point to examples in the real world, so things don't just become opinion. You can point to something and say it's not just my opinion. So I think one of the success stories of an old thing that actually did get canceled prematurely but was brought back successfully was X-Men 97.
Mhm.
That was a show that literally, it's called X-Men 97 because it's literally taking place like after the 90s show. And I know that Kevin Feige, I've read in there, he said, you've got to have at least, like, the one mandate I'm giving you is you have to have the same opening like theme, right? But the aesthetic of the show and a lot of the voice cast are from the original show. So they were able to keep it true, but of course update it, and make it relevant to now, and it succeeded. So I think that for a lot of the creators who feel like you have to like wipe the slate clean and start fresh, I'm saying that's cool. Like, you can do that because it's not the same era, but I do think it's possible, as you said, to be true to the spirit, but still obviously make little tweaks here and there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's my soapbox, Kevin.
So going back to the storytelling thing, because One of the things, one of my favorite shows, and I got Andrew to watch it, reverse of Attack on Titan here, is Lost. So
Yes.
I love Lost, whatever. Um, but I saw an interview when they were talking to the creators, and they said, if it was made today, what would it be? And they're like, it would be a completely different show because the audiences are completely different. We had, hour-long 24 episode seasons. Now we do hour-long 10 episode seasons. And so thinking about something like Robotech, where let's just average it out, say the average season's 28 episodes of 22 minutes, give or take, right? If it was remade today, would you want to see something that was, shorter and a little more compact in its storytelling, or would you still want to see that longer form, maybe shorter episode format?
I kind of I was actually watching this. There's this new show on Amazon Prime. It's called On Call, and it's a cop
Mm-hmm.
drama.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's right here set in Long Beach, which is where the convention was, ironically. So I'm like seeing all the, and I'm in Southern California and I see this thing, but it's each episode's only a half hour. And usually
Mm,
like these dramas are usually hour long, but I appreciate it. It's half hour. It's very digestible, and it's very but the story is very, very sharp. It's very uh sharp, to the point, got real tight characterization, and so I kind of like that. And uh revisiting Robotech by doing half-hour episodes, because I think you could do really quality. It doesn't need to be hour long. I mean, you could like do it in movie format. You could do it in hour long, but I think probably half hour would probably be the best, because there's a kind of an economy of storytelling you have to do in a half hour.
mhm,
Because when you have your bit, your beginning, middle, and end, your three-act structure, or in Robotech, or actually the original series was essentially a two-act structure, because you'd have that middle commercial break,
mhm,
right in
mhm.
the middle. But you still have to do all this setup, and you have that. Um, and I think that anime kind of lends itself to kind of doing it in the half hour format. I mean, but then again, it's like however long it takes to tell the story is how long it takes to tell the story. If
Right.
you approach it by saying, I'm going to tell this story in a half hour format, then you have your beginning, middle, and end, but you're probably going to have to be a bit you're going to have to be tight on it. You're going to
Mhm.
have to make sure that your dialogue, you don't have big rambling monologues, because you got to you have a lot of information to convey, and it's like, well, what are you going to do in the story is you have to set up the drama, you have to set up the
Right.
protagonist, you have to set up well, what are we trying to accomplish here in the episode? Are we doing like a self-contained episode, or are we doing an arc, a story with about that affects the greater arc? um I think the 30-minute show format worked for the original Robotech. There's no reason I think it couldn't work again. I think I remember when we were working on like Shadow Chronicle, what ended up being Shadow Chronicles. People would say, "Well, is it going to be a TV show or is it going to be a movie?" And it was kind of people kind of get caught up in uh, was it a TV show or movie? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like, ultimately a story is what it is in whatever format, and whether you're presenting it as a movie or if you're presenting it as a TV show. Now, ultimately, it was presented a movie, and fans can make their decision on and have made their decision on what they thought that story was like. Um, but it's like the responsibility was to tell a good story in a movie. Like for Shadow Chronicles, they did it specifically as a movie. It wasn't ever done as a 30-minute episode. It was done as like what, a 90-minute movie.
Mhm.
So that's the format that it should be judged in.
Yeah.
Did they tell a successful story in that 90-minute time period. So
Yeah, and you make a good point about telling the story. I think that now that we're in the streaming age, we do see a lot of shows that will be generally a 25-minute show, but sometimes they have a 20-minute episode. Sometimes they have a 35-minute episode. As long as they can tell their story, they're not quite as hamstrung. Because
Yes.
when Robotech came out, when all of the shows we grew up with came out, you had to structure your show if you were doing a good job around, like you said, commercial breaks. So,
yeah,
you had to think about your show structure. If you were doing an hour long, you were actually doing a 45-minute show because you had 15 minutes of commercials. And if you were doing it just right, you would have your commercial breaks in the right place. And things like that. So it's definitely was a more, arguably more complicated time to write. I think if you have that flexibility that streaming gives you, I think that probably does, um, give you some benefit and some flexibility these days.
yeah. Like I say when I say 30 minutes, I obviously mean the
Yeah.
24 minutes,
Right, right, right.
uh, like that. Like, but I remember the original episodes were a two-act structure,
Hmm.
and but then like you have like Star Trek. Star Trek was teaser and four acts, or
Hmm.
was it teaser and five acts? I can't remember. It was like teaser and five
Yeah.
acts, and it had its own flow to it. You know, you set up the drama or the stakes in that first teaser, or you set that's the thing to hook everyone in. But then you do the first act, the second act, and then all the way up in there. So if you watch like Star Trek, it has a each episode, it follows that same teaser and five acts structure, and it has its own kind of flow, which is different from the two-act structure that you have when in that you see in the original Robotech. But the thing is, both can work, you know,
Hmm.
and but ultimately, it's like, are you telling a good story? And I think
Yeah.
it can be told in any format, whether it's a movie, whether it's whether it's a TV episode, and whether what length the TV episode is. It's kind of ultimately, are you telling a good story? And if you need to tell it in 45 minutes, tell it in 45 minutes, you know,
I
I
love
know,
it.
yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of, my thinking is ultimately just tell a good story and people will
Yeah.
watch.
Agreed. Agreed. Um, yeah. So as far as like unfettered access, then, because I'll just jump on to that question, like
Yeah.
carte blanche, you had a blank check. Robotech is your show. How would you proceed? And you can even talk about who you bring on board, like all that stuff. Like you go ham.
Oh,
The sky's the limit.
oh boy. Yeah. Hmm. Oh, I know there are people I definitely, if I could, yeah, there are people I would call up. I'd call up right now. But I'm not gonna get into that because there's you know all I can say is that even now you could do it. You could do a great Robotech. You
Mhm.
just need to get the right people in. And I know a couple people. I know a couple people. I mean, certainly uh the people who wrote it, like guys like Steve Kramer, Greg Snegoff. Yeah, I would definitely be calling them up, just because one, they just understand that dialogue, and they
Mhm.
they understand how characters talk, and but then there's other people who are experienced in film and television that I think that who grew up on Robotech and who understand and appreciate it. Um, yeah, there's all sorts of people out there who would be interested in, and yeah, and then it's like, well, what story would you tell? Well, there's a whole lot of stuff that you could do. So, um, but yeah, that's a I'd probably want to put a lot more thought into it.
Sure.
Uh, but I just definitely know, like, I definitely want to get some of the original guys, even though most of what they were doing was adaptation. They're still there's the understandings of rhythms storytelling. Because that's what they did when they were, even though they were adapting existing scripts, they had to understand how do you tell a story and how do you tell a story in the time frame. And so they knew how to, do those things to the point. And I learned a lot from, talking to them and seeing, they were really able to, with all respect to the original shows, which they did use as a basis because they did operate from adapting the translated scripts. Uh, Robotech took a lot into making itself its own show by adding subtext and adding off-camera dialogue. And so I think that works to the benefit. Some people complain that Robotech, oh, it has so much too much narration. No, it doesn't. I don't think so. I think it helps the story. And I think some of the off-camera dialogue is brilliant, and it really helps hone the story. So I would love to work with some of the original Robotech writers just to kind of, bring that, their skill set, but also I would like to see how they work in a purely creative environment where they're kind of, well, what do you think the character would do here? Like now we're not confined to, oh, they have to do what's in the animation.
Right.
We're kind of like, I would like to see them on a creative level, what they could offer. Certainly they understand characters and stuff like that. And that I think that's something that would be cool to bring in. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, but there's definitely, I think it could work. I think Robotech could work today. It's not past its prime. It
Yeah.
could still work, but it would take the right people making the right decisions on it. So yeah.
I feel like it's part of like the zeitgeist at this point. Like people know like Robotech was influential to so much that came after it. And I
Mhm.
think because it's kind of been in limbo so long, I think it's prime for a comeback of some kind, whether it's a full reboot, whether it's an extension of the story, whether it's a side story somewhere else in the universe, however you want to do it. I feel like you said, as long as it's done right, I think I think it's in a perfect place to make that comeback. It's wild to me that this is a 40-year-old show. Because like,
Mhm.
especially when you think of the maturity of the storytelling of an animated show, like it's relatively modern.
It holds up.
And yeah,
It holds
and
up.
yeah, I think it's prime for some kind of comeback.
Well, I remember very clearly one time I was talking to a lawyer at Harmony Gold, and they asked me, well, fans like a new Robotech? And my point blank answer was, they'll like it if it's good.
Hmm.
And ultimately that's it. It's like they're gonna they'll make a decision they'll let you know what they think about it. And if they don't like it, they'll let you know. And you better focus on, let's make it good and then worry about everything after that. Because if you don't make a good Robotech, no one's gonna like it.
Yeah.
And if people don't like it, they don't buy it. They don't give you money, you know. And
Yeah.
this is Robotech is a franchise, but we're seeing there's you know issues right now with larger franchises like Star Wars. Yes, it's a multi-million-dollar franchise, and I remember, oh yeah, yeah, but these movies make $100 million or something like that. But I'm like, imagine how much more money you'd make if the movies were actually good, you know like you know the sequel trilogy or even the prequel trilogy. I remember, maybe people think the prequel trilogy is great now, but I
Hmm.
remember back then, not a lot of people
Yeah.
didn't like it back then. And because being an OG fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, I remember watching the prequels and it to be like, I wish these movies were good
Yeah.
because the thirst, the desire for it is there. And even now, it's like when Episode 7 came out, did phenomenally well, but I think when you look at it, I think it missed the mark with a lot of fans, and I think the state of where like Star Wars is kind of in that situation where they're like, it's like, well, tell me a good story and I'll be there, and some of the stuff I'm seeing, it's like it's just not that good, and but there's always a thirst for that. There's a
Hmm.
thirst for good stories, and the fans will still be there. Uh, so maybe one day, a really good one is. I mean, Andor is great. I love that show.
Rogue One was,
Rogue One, baby.
mhm.
Yeah.
So I want to, one of the things that we want to be, of course, I think there's being critical and there's celebrating, and I think that my vibe is definitely celebratory.
Yeah.
So one of
Yes.
my favorite kind of examples of something that worked was I met you in person for the first time at a con. I met Kevin for the first time at a con. And I think besides Back to the Future, which is funny because this guy worked on both franchises, actually, which is crazy. Terry Matalas, he's 49 years old. He was a
Yes.
fan of Back to the Future and Star Trek The Next Generation. New York Comic Con 2022, me and Kevin meet for the first time. We watch the Picard panel at New York Comic Con, and we're
Mm.
watching this guy who was a fan actually moderating the entire TNG cast. They're all there. That was, I don't know if you've watched that on YouTube, but it was a great panel. And
Hmm.
for me, like I watched all three seasons of Picard and they
Hmm.
progressively got better. So by the
Mhm.
third season, I they took the theme song from First Contact. I'm getting chills talking about it. Like that was a damn good story. And they literally gave the cast a phenomenal send off. And like they were even talking about, hey, Paramount, are you listening? Like, we're down for movies, just saying,
Yeah.
so it was like, this is an example of what you were saying. The fans will be there. And we showed up. We showed up. So I just want to just point that out, like to really kind of drive home your point that, and I think Robotech is very much in the same state. If
And
you had a Terry Matalas type individual who
yeah.
could bring back
Well,
put the band back together and make it
well,
happen.
yeah. Well. Let me tell you this. I've known Terry Matalas for 20 years, and I knew him when he was Brandon Braga's assistant at Paramount. Um, and I remember, he'd invite me over, and we'd go. I'd tour the Voyager set, and so we've been friends for 20 years. I'm absolutely thrilled by his success, and I remember when he got announced. Well, I remember because he did watch. He made 12 Monkeys, which is an amazing series. You
Yeah.
must
Yeah.
watch
Yeah.
it if you have
Yes.
not
Yes.
watched it. It's an amazing series. But I remember being so impressed by his storytelling abilities. I mean, because it's one thing when we first got to know each other, because we were both, working our way in Hollywood. But like when I saw like his work, like I remember I sent him a message like after when the finale happened to 12 Monkeys, and I was like, dude, what did you do? And he's like, what? And I said that was the perfect ending of a show. I've never seen someone stick the landing the way you stuck the landing. And then, and I mean, he's great. And then, he moved on. He's worked on a number of different projects. But then when they announced that he was coming to Picard, and I think you're being a little generous. I think the first two seasons of Picard are
For me, it was
uh,
the second season. I liked the first season. The second season was definitely iffy, but the third season was great.
oh, that was not quite what it should be, but I remember I messaged him after he got announced that he was coming on Picard, and I just said, "You're the man for the job." I said, "I know you're really busy, and I'm not going to bug you, but I said you are the man for the job. You are the universe has chosen you like to be here in this part." And I said, "I wish you all the luck in the world. I know you're gonna nail this thing." And God, by God, he did it. He gave us the next generation movies
Hmm.
that we need that we never got.
Yep.
I
Yep.
look at Picard season 3, and I almost wished like someone would edit them into like 3 movies, a
Ah,
trilogy,
Hmm.
and it'd be like that is your movie trilogy saga. I mean, I remember my favorite moment was when they took out the D in at the
Yes.
end of episode
Yes.
9. I was crying. I was like, and the thing is, I thought that was so brilliant because I thought there's no way you would do that. And then when they did it, I was like, this is perfect.
And they had a
Uh,
story accurate reason for it. Like it made sense in the story. It wasn't just cheap fan service. Like it was, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was well thought out, and I've told him this. I've told him this in our own private conversations. Like you know, yeah, wow, I mean, you really thought it. And I've been able to meet some of the other people who worked on it. He had a great stable of writers or something. So kind of going back, you had mentioned like who I'd bring on. That's the first guy I'd call because and I tell you what, he loves Robotech. And
See, and
he said that that's a dream. That's a dream project for him. Yeah.
and we felt that when we saw him at the panel because you could tell that what he was going to do was going to be good because he loved it. He had a passion for it. And not only
Mhm.
that, he had a reverence for the actors. He had a reverence for the people involved. So you can see that in season 9 where the actors actually come through in the characters. I've been to
Mhm.
at this point several Star Trek conventions and one of the people that always amazes me and it just kills me is Deanna Troy, Marina
wizards.
Sirtis. She is the best kind of insane, and you don't understand it when you watch the show. And so in Picard,
You see that.
they let her
Yeah.
throw a little bit of in there, and
They,
it works so
yeah.
well.
Well, that's why he understood the ensemble cast, and
Yeah.
he made sure that every character got their moment.
Hmm.
Like they got a chance to really be integral to the storyline. I mean, the first thing you start off is Crusher as Gates McFadden's
Hmm.
Dr. Crusher. You know, and those were some, I mean, so he made some very character driven story choices, and that's
Yes.
the thing I really appreciate with what he did. So yeah, that's a guy right there who, and I mean, he's phenomenally busy right now. I mean, he's working on the Vision
Hmm.
for series that's good for Marvel, and then he's working on a new version of Enemy Mine
Oh,
Ooh.
for Fox.
nice.
Ooh.
Uh, I know he worked on a remake of Witch Mountain for Disney. Uh,
Okay.
he's busy. Yeah, I mean, he's busy. But yeah, I know, he and I are the same wavelength. We as my other friend Robert Meyer Burnett would say, we park our shuttlecraft in the same launch bay. So, you know,
You go. Well, I
we're
love
we're,
that.
we're yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the synchronicity because I had no idea that you were friends with him. And
Oh yeah.
meanwhile, I'm watching him 2 years ago going, that's the dude right there. Like, I like
Yeah.
his energy. I feel what he's doing. And I
Mhm.
definitely, we both do, but like, pay attention to the creative people behind the scenes. If I see a name that I know has done good work, I get more comfortable. Something you said earlier about, you said Terry had a bunch of writers. And that to me is also, I think, a huge part of what makes a project work, where it's not, what's his name? Sebastian Stan. Sebastian
Yeah.
Stan said this about Kevin Feige. He said, I can't say this about a lot of producers or executives, but I can say this about Kevin. Kevin's the kind of guy where if it's in the creative process, there are no egos in the room. It's not about whose idea it is. It's the best idea will win. And he said it takes a guy like Kevin to establish that. And again, Sebastian says that's not always the case. Like, in his
It's
other
not.
places. So
I guarantee, yeah, it is definitely not. And I speak that from personal experience. Yeah.
and we can but just saying in general, like that's the case. So so whatever. All I'm saying is, in the event that Robotech does get a Picard-like thing, it's also funny you said, because in my own kind of fantasy world, like it's Paramount. Like Paramount is who I want to work with, and the reason why I say Paramount is several reasons. Number one, TMP, the motion picture, was at Paramount, and producer on that, I was watching the DVD extras, and that was the moment when I said a producer would be a great job. I forget his name right now, but he was talking about the process of getting the movie together. Secondly, Picard, Paramount, Terry. Then you talk about him getting a bunch of people together to make it happen. So ultimately, passion is taking over my brain. The point of what I'm saying ultimately is that if Robotech were to ever come back, I hope it's a Paramount situation, number one, because I think they have a good stable. Even Marvel. Marvel, before Disney bought them, they would partner and release the first few films, I think, through Paramount Studios. And I think Hulk was Universal, but the rest was Paramount. I hope it's a stable situation where it's a writer's room where the best ideas win, and it's like getting the band back together. That's the way it's got to be. And thank God the franchise, in my opinion, could be described as being in cryostasis or on ice. So it's preserved, it is not too banged up, and it's ready to rip. I'm actually scrolling because I want to get the name of the producer. Jerry Eisenberg. There it is. In June 1976, Paramount assigned Jerry Eisenberg, a young and active producer, to be executive producer of the project, with the budget expanded to $8 million. When I was watching Jerry talk, I was like, I want your job. That sounds awesome.
All I
Jerry.
can ever think about when I think about Star Trek the Motion Picture is that goddamn shuttle fly up scene that takes like 15 minutes where they're just flying up and like they're playing the theme song and you can tell at some point they're like, just loop it.
That is the greatest. That is the greatest sequence. One of the greatest sequences in cinema history. I will not allow anyone to besmirch that. That is, I'll tell you what, that is starship porn.
It is
It's
for sure.
It is,
and it was beautiful.
she's
That's
a
my
beautiful
favorite
lady,
one.
and we
So
love her.
long.
That's
The
the
refit.
Starship Enterprise, and you see Kirk looks at that like he looks at a
Mhm.
woman.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm talking, you fall in love. That right there. Anyone who says that sequence is, oh, it's too long, no, you
She's a
cannot truly
swan. You know what?
appreciate.
She's a swan. She's a swan. But I do feel like Khan, that rhyme, Swan and Khan. But I think Khan just kind of got to the point. Like Khan to me is my favorite
Yeah.
of films. But I do think that this could be blasphemy. We'll find out. But I do think TMP is a gorgeously shot film. And I've heard
For
it
sure.
compared to the Asimov, not Asimov, to the Kubrick film, 2001. I've
2001.
heard it compared to,
That's
it's
fair.
like Star Trek's take on 2001.
Well,
You gonna say something?
they put all. I mean, I'm talking. They spent so much money
Money.
on the VFX
Yeah.
for that
8 million.
movie. You goddamn right. They're gonna put that all on the screen. And I mean, literally, they had shot so much of that stuff with Trumbull, like shot the Enterprise, and it's like,
You got to use it.
yeah, we're gonna use all this stuff because they've shot all this stuff. And I'm sorry, you listen to that track with,
Jerry
Jerry Goldsmith. It's gorgeous. And you know what? Just take a moment and appreciate the grandeur of Star Trek, because so much of Star Trek right now in the TV the TV shows, it's small. It's like you're watching TV, but there's no mistaking. You watch those sequences and particularly that sequence in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, you are watching a movie. And that's where it's like you gotta sit back and, you know what? just enjoy the visual delight of seeing a man in love.
That's
That's
sure.
Kirk in
And I will
love
say
with.
too, like that's one of the few times in the entirety of Star Trek where you actually feel the scale of the ship.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
I feel like, you see it in Stardock, you see it in all these
Mhm.
places, and you can tell that it's big, but that one you really get the feel of the scale. And that's still the Enterprise. That's not the D. That's not the Galaxy class big Mamma Jamma. Like that's the original. That's not so
Mhm.
big anymore, and it's
Mhm.
still you got the scale of how big it was. So yeah, it is an epic scene. It's just
Mhm.
really long.
Yeah, but that's the glory of it, and you just you just lose yourself in the music
Mm.
and the journey. I mean, it's a journey right there because it starts off this little space station out there, and the little shuttle, just from the shuttle leaving the space dock, and it's and the thing is, there's no dialogue. Just
Hmm.
these looks. Sometimes you like, there's times where Kirk looks over at Scotty and Scotty's like, I know. And it's like, and Kirk, and the way I mean, Shatner is totally underrated as an actor. And
Hmm.
people, they do imitations of him or something. But that man knew Kirk. That man knows Kirk on a genetic level. Like he knows
Yeah.
how Kirk would react. And you just see it in his eyes, like, when he's looking at the Enterprise, like that's his true love right there. And yeah, yeah, it's like me, man. That's the quickest way. I'll jump on. Like, no, that sequence, I wouldn't change a frame of that. I wouldn't cut any of that. And uh, there are a lot of stuff in Star Trek Motion Picture that's really long. The director's cut is really good, and you should watch that because they've I consider it the definitive version.
Hmm.
Especially even with this new when they upgraded it to HD, they even added some really new VFX, which it makes it even cooler. And also, like to me, it's still the more visually interesting uh, Star Trek movie. Like I can go and watch and kind of be fascinated, but you could like you make no mistake, that's a motion picture.
Yeah.
Whereas all the other Star Treks, I could watch it on a small screen. Star Trek 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the Next Generation movies, Picard, still small. Whereas motion picture is still it's a cinematic experience. So anyway, I just
Yeah.
jumped in on
Nah,
a
no, that was
motion picture.
perfect. Organic is the way I love it.
Uh,
But yeah, no, I think we've done like we have so much more we could talk about, but I feel like this was fun for sure.
mhm.
Talked Robotech. We didn't even talk so much about the story itself, but we got into it a little bit. But I think overall, I think we got a good sense of just what you brought to the table, especially again starting with that Robocon 10, and then some of the insight that you've had, being close to the franchise,
Mhm,
having been invited, which is great,
mhm. Yeah.
to kind of represent the voice of the fan.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's, again, that's what my experience was. And yeah, I didn't interview it. I didn't apply for a job. I was essentially offered to come on and work for it. And it's like a dream come true for a Robotech fan to be invited to
Mhm.
be part of that. Um, and however it turned out that I still value that experience. I had a great time. And there were some wonderful moments and wonderful people that I met and got to work with. So, that's all part of the whole Robotech experience. Though most of my experience is still is as a fan, first and foremost. And I started as a fan and I'll end as a fan. And now as we're here on the 40th anniversary of Robotech, I'm not surprised one bit that it has the legs that it has. Uh, we talked with the actors at Anime LA doing this, first RT40 event celebrating the 40th anniversary of Robotech. Um, that the convention organizer Alec Orak, who runs Anime Los Angeles, I've known him since the 80s. So he and I go way, way back. And he asked me, am I planning to do anything for Robotech for the 40th anniversary? Because he knew that I had done. He had been there at Robocon 10.
Wow.
He had been there through the convention appearances that I had done when I was working at Harmony Gold. He was there for the RT25 event where we kind of threw essentially a high school reunion for the voice actors. And the people who worked on Robotech. It was a banquet dinner. It wasn't a convention. It was a banquet dinner. We charged $85 for the fans. Basically, we bought a very nice steak dinner for all of the cast, and people got up, they got dressed up, and it literally was a reunion for them. And we got to essentially let them take their bows, get applauded by the audience. So, and that was in 2010, the 25th anniversary. Sadly, Carl Masick passed away. He was obviously going to go to the event, and I had been talking with him, and he was really excited, and that's the one thing, like, fate is cruel sometimes, because that night would have been his night. That would have been the night to really salute
Yeah.
a real visionary. You can't, and as much criticism as he has gotten, sometimes he deserves the praise so much more because he brought Robotech to us, um, and that was a great night. But it was a great night for him, a great night for the cast. And I had essentially said, okay, well, that's it for me on Robotech. I don't think there's anything more that I have to say about it or do, and I'm good. And then, so my friend Alec calls me up sometime last year, and he's all, "Hey, are you doing anything for the 40th anniversary of Robotech?" And I said, "No, I'm kind of retired on that." And then he says, "Well, I want to do something for the 40th anniversary of Robotech at Anime Los Angeles." And I said, "Who do you want to? Who do you need to talk to? I will help you in any way." And we ended up doing 8 panels over a 4-day weekend, and I hadn't done 4 days at a convention in, oh my gosh, over 17 years that I had not done a full-blown convention. Oh, I felt it afterwards, that's for sure. But it was a great experience to be able to get together with the voice actors again. And we just did some great fun panels. Got to meet some great fans, a lot of them for the first time. And a lot of people that I hadn't seen, in many years, over the years. So it was a great opportunity to revisit Robotech, and kind of almost reinvigorated me too. Hey, let's, there might be a little bit more to talk about with Robotech. At least talk about it because it's such a great show.
Yeah.
Something I observed too as well, and again, I think I'm a good sense of energy because I talked about your boy Terry, and I was right. No, but like the cohesion of the cast, like they actually are friends, like outside of, it wasn't just a job for them. I mean, it was a job, but they actually enjoyed being with each other. So much
Yeah.
so, fun fact, they used to record as a group, but they would clown around so much when they're all in a group. They said, "Okay, cut that. Now you just come in and do your lines on your own." Like there's
Yeah.
nobody else in the booth. But
Hmm.
the camaraderie and the warmth I felt when I was watching the voice cast panel was the same kind of warmth that I felt from the TNG cast
Yeah.
when
Yeah. I
we
was
Hmm.
gonna
were
say the same thing. Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
moderation. And that's just
Mhm.
beautiful. It is, I love that. I really do.
Yeah.
So had to point that out.
It is amazing, because they become quite a community. Um, but they all kind of started. Robotech was where they all started. That's where they all kind of came together. And had Robotech not happened, I don't know. I don't know if those people would know each other or they would associate with each other. Um, and I mean, even though it was that production was probably over the course of 6 months, and there hasn't been any real a whole lot of Robotech that's been produced since then. They still are that community because they've all become been working actors in that community for a long time, and but Robotech's kind of where it started, so it's all very special to them. And I've talked to them since Anime Los Angeles, and they've uh they've all expressed their appreciation that people still remember it, and they realize that Robotech really was an important part of that experience. And I think that is something that I sometimes have to remind myself of what that is. Uh, and then so that to me that's what made it so important. uh he like one of the actors said, he sent a message. He said, "We all appreciate your continued efforts in acknowledging Robotech as a seminal accomplishment in the field of English anime." and and I think that all of them have that same sentiment.
Well, I think this is now a good time for me to say once again, thank you
Yeah,
for
for
not only
sure.
coming on this show, but thank you for also being, along with Dennis, of course, the lightning rod to bring Anime LA RT40 at Anime LA and creating
Mhm.
that community. So that's got to be said. So I'm saying this for the netizens out there. Thank you, Tom.
Uh, my pleasure. And again, I started as a fan, I'll end as a fan, and I just having other fans there to experience that, that's the reward right there, is really being around other people who care about that show as much as I do. Makes it all worth it, in the end. And so I was happy to do it, happy to jump back into it. Robotech is like, in a lot of ways is my kind of my first love, certainly on anime. And it was a whole lot of fun to do. And maybe we'll try to do something more this fourth anniversary. We got almost 11 more months left in the year.
Yeah.
Let's just try to do something. Maybe we'll figure out something else to do. But we started off with a bang, and let's I don't know, let's look into possibilities of continuing it in some way.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, then I will take the reins here and say thank you for everybody at home for watching. Thank you for listening into the audio. If you're listening to the audio, have a great week. We will see you next time, and hopefully soon we'll see you with some more Robotech content too.